The grenade looked ridiculous. Now, wrapped in torn canvas and wound with salvaged wire, it resembled something a child might make in art class. Corporal Danny Fisher had laughed so hard he nearly choked on his coffee when he first saw it. Gift-wrapping grenades now, hack. Like we're sending birthday presents to Hitler? But nobody was laughing at 0547 hours on June 20th, 1944, as Private First Class Margaret Maggie Kellerman crouched in a muddy Norman ditch, her absurd creation pressed against her chest. 40 yards ahead, invisible in the pre-dawn fog, a concrete bunker waited. Machine gun fire had erupted from it 3 times in the past hour. 2 men from Charlie Company already lay silent in the tall grass. Maggie pulled the pin. She had 4 to 5 seconds from the moment she released the safety lever. 4 to 5 seconds to prove that a textile worker's daughter from Massachusetts understood something about friction and physics that the entire U.S. Army had missed. 4 to 5 seconds before everyone discovered whether her crazy idea was brilliant or suicidal. The problem was simple, really. Mark II grenades, nicknamed pineapples for their segmented surface, were excellent weapons in theory. 21 ounces of cast iron and TNT, designed to fragment into 40 pieces of shrapnel, but against the concrete bunkers Germany had spent 4 years perfecting along the Atlantic Wall, they were nearly useless. The bunkers were engineering masterpieces. 3 to 8 feet of reinforced concrete, firing slits narrow as mail slots, positioned at ground level where grenades rolled away harmlessly. Even when a soldier got close enough to throw one through a slit, risking machine gun fire that could traverse an entire field in seconds, the spherical grenades bounced off interior walls and rolled back out before detonating. The 4-second fuse gave German defenders plenty of time to kick them away or take cover. In the first week after D-Day, entire squads were pinned down for hours by single bunker positions. Some units lost half their strength trying to close distance on these fortified nests. The manual said use combined arms, tanks, artillery, air support, but in Normandy's hedgerow country, tanks bogged in mud, artillery couldn't get the angle, and air support was grounded by weather, which left the infantry with pineapple grenades that bounced back, and defenders who had 4 seconds to react. Sergeant Tom Brewster had a saying, "Doctrine is what you do when everything goes according to plan. Combat is what happens when nothing does." Maggie had watched 3 different methods fail. She'd seen soldiers try to throw grenades through firing slits, only to watch them bounce back. She'd seen rifles used to push grenades through openings, giving defenders even more time to take cover. She'd watched flamethrower operators get cut down before they could cross open ground. There had to be a better way. The idea came to her on June 18th, during a rare rest period in a captured German trench. She was cleaning mud from her rifle when she noticed Private Jimmy Woo eating his rations. His spoon kept slipping on the greasy hash until he wrapped a handkerchief around the can. The simple cloth gave him enough friction to hold it steady. Friction, grip, control. Maggie looked at the grenades on her belt, then at a bunker firing slit visible 40 yards away. Grenades bounced off concrete. They rolled on flat surfaces. They didn't stick, they didn't catch. What if they could? She started with canvas, heavy tent material, available everywhere because something was always tearing. She cut a strip and wound it around a grenade's midsection, leaving the top and bottom exposed. When she set it on a slanted board, it didn't roll. The fabric created drag, friction against surfaces. But canvas alone wasn't enough. She found thin communication wire and wrapped it around the canvas in a loose spiral. The wire created small ridges, points that would catch on rough concrete. When she tested her modification on various surfaces, rough concrete, angled wood, smooth metal, the wrapped grenade caught and held at angles where an unwrapped one rolled away. She showed it to Brewster that evening. He turned it over in his hands, face skeptical. "You want to throw this at Germans?" "Into Germans. Into their bunker." She explained her theory. The canvas and wire would create drag, making the throw more stable. More importantly, when it entered a firing slit, the wrap would catch on the edges. Concrete was rough. Bunker slits had irregular lips. A standard grenade was smooth. It bounced. Her modified grenade would catch, wedge, maybe stick in the opening. "And if it sticks in the slit instead of going through?" Brewster asked. "Then it detonates right at the opening. Blast goes into the bunker anyway. Still better than bouncing back at us. Fisher, listening nearby, nearly choked again. Sarge, she wants to gift wrap grenades. The wrapping increases surface area, Maggie continued. More drag means better control. And look, she demonstrated on broken concrete, showing how the wire caught in tiny cracks. This won't bounce, it catches. Brewster studied the modification, then handed it back. It's against regulations to modify ordnance. So is half of what we do out here. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. He just walked away, shaking his head. Margaret Louise Kellerman was born in 1922 in Lowell, Massachusetts, in a house that smelled of boiled cabbage and machine oil. Her father worked the looms at boot cotton mills. Her mother took in sewing, her pedal-powered Singer running late most nights. Maggie was the middle child of 5, which meant she learned early to make herself useful in ways her siblings hadn't thought of. When the kitchen pump broke, 9-year-old Maggie fashioned a temporary seal from rubber jar rings and friction tape. When her father's lunch pail latch snapped, she rebuilt it using parts from a broken mousetrap. "That girl sees things sideways," her father said once. At Lowell High School, Maggie's mechanical aptitude found no outlet. She excelled in mathematics but was barred from shop class. Those rooms were for boys. She was directed toward home economics and typing instead. But she spent lunch hours reading technical manuals in the library. Her unconventional thinking manifested in small rebellions. She rebuilt her bicycle using parts from 3 broken ones, creating something neither sleek nor pretty, but remarkably efficient. She modified her mother's sewing machine to run quieter by adding felt padding, analyzing vibration patterns until she understood which parts created noise. "Margaret thinks like a mechanic trapped in a girl's body," her teacher wrote. It wasn't meant as a compliment. When Pearl Harbor came, Maggie was 19 and working at her father's mill. The roar of the machines felt like a countdown, ticking toward something inevitable. She enlisted on her 20th birthday. Basic training revealed that the Army had no idea what to do with women who wanted to think like mechanics. Maggie was assigned to clerical duties, then driving, then communications. Eventually, someone noticed she could disassemble and reassemble a radio faster than most men in her unit. Her knack for improvising repairs earned her a transfer to a supply and maintenance company. But Maggie wanted to be closer to the actual problems that needed solving. She volunteered for forward area operations and was attached to a combat unit as a technical specialist, officially to maintain equipment, unofficially to be wherever her sideways thinking might prove useful. She met Brewster's squad in February 1944. Within a week, they called her Hack, short for hacksaw, because she was always finding ways to cut through problems. Despite regulations that should have kept her from direct combat, Brewster decided that if Maggie could keep his equipment working and his men alive, he wasn't about to question the paperwork. Over 2 days, Maggie refined her grenade design. She tested different wrapping techniques, experimented with wire placement, practiced throwing at various targets. She learned how the extra drag affected distance and accuracy. The other modifications she'd made: padded rifle slings, modified magazine pouches, a periscope from a shaving mirror. Those made sense to everyone. But wrapped grenades? Even Jimmy, who usually supported her innovations, seemed doubtful. "Just seems like extra steps," he said quietly. "And combat's already got too many steps." Only when Brewster saw the manual fail did he relent. Charlie Company had tried to clear the bunker that morning. 8 men lost, no progress. The lieutenant's briefing was grim. Standard construction, 5-foot concrete walls, MG-42 machine gun firing 1,200 rounds per minute. No artillery support, no armor. Figure it out. They moved out at 2200 hours. 7 soldiers plus Maggie, navigating hedgerows in absolute darkness. It took 2 hours to cover less than a mile. By 0100, they were positioned 200 yards from the objective, waiting in a drainage ditch. Through infrared binoculars, Maggie could see the bunker's outline, squatting in a shallow depression, partially buried, the firing slit angled to cover the approach road. Jimmy smelled cigarette smoke on the wind. It was occupied. At 0345, Brewster made the decision. "Hack, you get one chance, one throw. If it works, maybe we all go home. If it doesn't, we do it the regular way and hope. They move forward at 0400, closing in teams, covering each other through rain squalls. At 10 yards from the bunker, they settled into a shell crater. Maggie could smell cigarettes now. 40 yards to the target, a 6-inch opening, in darkness, in rain, with a modified grenade nobody believed would work. She pulled the pin. The safety lever was still held by her grip. 4 to 5 seconds from release. The canvas wrapping suddenly seemed impossibly stupid. What had she been thinking? This was combat, not a school project. "Any time now, Hack," Brewster whispered. She stood, arm back, and threw. The modified grenade arced through rain, tumbling slightly. The canvas catching air, creating drag just as she'd calculated. It seemed to hang forever, a dark shape against dark sky. For a terrible moment, she thought she'd thrown short. But the trajectory was perfect. The grenade entered the firing slit cleanly and stuck. The canvas caught on rough concrete edges, exactly as she'd hoped. The wire snagged in irregularities. Instead of bouncing through and rolling around inside, the grenade wedged partially in the slit, blocked from rolling back by the canvas, acting like a net. 1 second, 2, 3. The explosion was massive but strangely muffled, the concrete containing the blast and directing it inward. The firing slit exhaled fire and smoke, a brief orange glow that lit everything. Then absolute silence. Brewster was already moving, rifle up. Fisher and Jimmy converged from the flanks. They reached the bunker and peered inside, then stepped back. All clear. Through the firing slit, devastation. The single grenade, detonating in a space barely 8 feet across, had done what 50 grenades thrown from outside couldn't. 3 German soldiers had been inside. They hadn't suffered. "Jesus," Fisher said quietly. 1 grenade, 1 throw. Jimmy examined the firing slit, running fingers over scorched concrete where the canvas had caught. It wedged perfectly, like a cork in a bottle. Brewster was already radioing. "Objective secured. 1 casualty, enemy. Used innovative ordnance. Will report details." In the east, the sky turned gray-blue. Dawn was coming. By June 21st, Maggie's modification had a name: Sticky Pineapples. Within 48 hours, 3 other squads had used canvas-wrapped grenades to clear bunkers. The technique spread through the battalion faster than rumors of hot food. Not every attempt succeeded. Improvisation with explosives had limits, but more worked than failed. By month's end, an estimated 40 bunkers had been cleared using variations of wrapped grenades. The battalion commander summoned Maggie on June 24th. She expected a reprimand. Instead, he asked her to demonstrate the technique to his staff officers. "I won't say I approve," the colonel said afterward, "because officially I can't approve soldiers modifying ordnance. But if my men continue surviving bunker assaults at higher rates, I won't ask too many questions about why." A war correspondent interviewed her briefly. The resulting article was 3 paragraphs on page 4, noting that innovative soldiers continue to adapt equipment to battlefield challenges. Maggie wasn't named, but the technique was described in enough detail for other units to replicate it. The shift in her squad was more profound. Fisher stopped joking, started asking her input on equipment problems. Roy showed her broken gear before discarding it. Even newcomers saw her as something fundamental. The person who thought differently, who saw solutions where others saw obstacles. Late one night on watch, Jimmy said quietly, "You know what you did wasn't just about grenades, right?" "What do you mean?" "You showed everyone that the way we've always done things isn't the only way. That doctrine is a starting point, not an ending point. That's dangerous thinking, Hack, good dangerous." By July, the technique had spread beyond the battalion. Other divisions experimented with variations, fabric tape, different materials, alternative wrapping methods. The Germans noticed and began modifying bunker designs, adding interior baffles. Innovation created counter-innovation. The war adapted. For Maggie, success meant more work. She spent hours teaching the technique, refining materials, documenting what worked. She became the battalion's unofficial expert on improvised equipment modification. Brewster's squad cleared 7 more bunkers in July using wrapped grenades. The technique didn't end the war or change its trajectory, but it saved lives, cleared obstacles, and proved that innovation wasn't about better weapons or more firepower. Sometimes it was just about seeing a 6-inch opening and asking, what if the grenade didn't bounce? Maggie Kellerman survived the war. So did Brewster, Fisher, Jimmy, and Roy. They fought through France into Germany, crossed the Rhine, and were in Bavaria when it ended. She'd wrapped an estimated 400 grenades by then, and the technique had spread throughout the theater. She returned to Lowell in November 1945, 23 years old, with a Bronze Star she never mentioned. The mill took her back, but the looms felt even louder, even more confining. She lasted 6 months. Using the GI Bill, she enrolled at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, one of the few women in the engineering program. The other students, mostly veterans, were skeptical until they saw how she thought about problems. She graduated in 1949 with a degree in mechanical engineering. Her thesis focused on friction coefficients and drag patterns, a formalization of principles she'd discovered wrapping grenades in a muddy ditch. She married Tom Brewster in 1950. They moved to California, where aerospace was hungry for engineers who could think creatively, who understood how small modifications could have large consequences. Maggie worked for Douglas Aircraft, then Lockheed, specializing in fail-safe systems and redundancy design, how to make complex equipment work when components failed, how to ensure astronauts had backup options when procedures broke down. It was the same sideways thinking she'd learned in Lowell, refined by war, formalized by education, applied to keeping people alive in hostile environments. She retired in 1987 with 17 patents and a generation of younger engineers, many of them women, trained in her approach. In 2004, at 82, she was interviewed for a PBS documentary about D-Day innovations. "Did you know it would work?" the interviewer asked. The interviewer asked, "I knew the principle was sound. The physics made sense. But did I know it would work in that specific moment, against that specific bunker? No. I hoped. I calculated. I prepared. But I didn't know." Were you scared? Terrified. But fear and action aren't opposites. You can be scared and still throw the grenade. You can doubt yourself and still test the theory. That's courage, not the absence of fear, but refusing to let fear make your decisions. She died in 2011 at 89. The obituary mentioned her aerospace career, her patents, her pioneering role as a woman in engineering. It mentioned briefly her war service. It didn't mention the grenades. That detail had been lost to time, buried in unit records and fading memories. But Tom Brewster kept a canvas-wrapped grenade, deactivated, harmless in his study. Under the display case was a placard he'd made. Innovation happens when someone refuses to accept that good enough is actually good enough. Danny Fisher told the story to his grandchildren every Memorial Day. In his version, Maggie was 10 feet tall and threw from 100 yards, and the bunker exploded like a volcano. The details were wrong, but the essence was right. Someone thought differently, acted boldly, changed what was possible. Jimmy Woo used Maggie's story in his physics classes, demonstrating with balls wrapped in different materials, showing how surface texture affected rolling. His students probably never made the connection to combat, but they learned the principle: simple modifications, profound effects. The lesson of Maggie Kellerman's wrapped grenades isn't about grenades. It's not even specifically about war, though war reveals principles that apply elsewhere. It's about the courage to see problems differently than everyone else sees them, about the willingness to try solutions that look absurd until they work, about understanding that expertise isn't the same as imagination, that sometimes the person who knows least about how things are supposed to be done figures out how things could be done better. Maggie wasn't trying to revolutionize warfare. She was trying to solve one specific problem: a 6-inch opening 40 yards away, defended by people who would kill her if she got close. The manual said throw grenades. Experience said grenades bounced back. She asked, what if they didn't? Canvas and wire, materials that cost nothing, available everywhere, transformed into the difference between success and failure. Not because the materials were special, but because the thinking was different. How many problems have we accepted as unsolvable because that's just how it is? How often do we follow the manual when it was written for different circumstances? How often do we need permission to try something new when permission never comes until success proves it wasn't needed? The wrapped grenade worked because Maggie understood the underlying principle and applied it creatively. She didn't need to invent new physics or discover new materials. She just needed to see existing things from a different angle. The Germans had concrete and steel, and years of engineering. The Americans had doctrine and training and overwhelming resources. Maggie had canvas and wire and the willingness to be mocked for kindergarten craft hour with explosives. She won. Not alone. Not permanently. The war didn't end because of wrapped grenades. But in that moment, her refusal to accept this is just how grenades work saved lives and proved that innovation doesn't require laboratories or advanced degrees or official approval. It just requires someone willing to wrap a grenade in canvas and see what happens. Think about the bunkers in your own life. The problems everyone says can't be solved with current resources, current knowledge, current approaches. The challenges where the manual doesn't work but nobody questions the manual. What's your canvas and wire? More importantly, what's stopping you from trying? Is it fear of mockery, of being the person who brings kindergarten craft to a serious problem? Is it respect for authority that says only trained professionals should attempt solutions? Is it the weight of we've always done it this way, crushing the small voice that says, but what if? Maggie Kellerman was 22 years old, a textile worker from Massachusetts, a woman in a military that barely knew what to do with women who wanted to fight. She had every reason to stay quiet, follow procedures, let the men with more experience handle the problems. She wrapped a grenade in canvas instead. The next time you face a problem that seems impossible with current tools and current thinking, remember the wrapped grenade. Remember that innovation doesn't require permission or credentials or even confidence. It just requires the willingness to try something different and see what happens. What shocked you most about Maggie's story? Was it that such a simple modification could have dramatic results? That the military initially rejected her innovation despite clear need? That she continued her innovative thinking into a groundbreaking aerospace career? That this story isn't more widely known? Because the world needs more people like Maggie Kellerman. More people willing to see problems differently. More people brave enough to be mocked for wrapping grenades until those wrapped grenades clear the bunker. Your canvas and wire are waiting. What will you wrap?